Hi, everybody. This is Michael Becker, and welcome to today's MEF webinar. I'm absolutely excited to have you here today, and I appreciate you joining us. So what we're going to talk about today is context, semantics, and mobile wallets, and what they have in common, and the future of the design systems that will make them possible as we unfold the future of what's happening with personal data and identity, organizational data and identity. So this is a really, really exciting time for us today. So let me go ahead and share my screen so you can see our presentation, and we'll kick things off. So again, today's webinar today is what does context, semantics, and mobile wallets have in common? The future of the connected individual engagement. The way we're going to navigate this webinar today is we're going to go through some introductions with our speakers. We're going to have an unbelievable number of new terminology for you to be aware of and consider and think about. So we're going to introduce some key terms. We'll then talk about the trends and challenges that in industry is facing as we look to adopt these concepts of mobile wallets. And then we're going to dig into these new data models, data frameworks, data approaches, and then conclude with some real live examples and demonstrations of what we're talking about today. But let's just jump right into the introductions. Again, I'm your host for today's session. My name is Michael Becker. I am the Personal Data and Identity Working Group Chair at the Mobile Ecosystem Forum. And I also have an advisory group I call Identity Praxis. With me today are Paul and Petri from the Human Colossus Foundation. And then Petri also works with the Wellbeing Cart, and Paul has other associations that he's involved with too. So gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Really appreciate it. And can you give us a brief introduction about your backgrounds?
Sure. Yes. So thank you, everyone. My name is Paul Knowles. I'm the head of the advisory council at the Human Colossus, which we can talk about in a minute, and I chair the decentralized semantics working group at the foundation. My background is really from the pharmaceutical sector. I've been working in data management for 25 years, so a lot of the things you see today will be kind of based off that knowledge. But I'll hand over to Petri. Petri, do you want to quickly intro?
Hello, my name is Petri Seljavaara. I am Finnish, as maybe my accent reveals, not American or British. I've been working in the UX side. I was responsible for Nokia mobile phone user experience and in the graphic side. And then I when I left Nokia, I did some important patents relating to this area. Once the foundation was set up, I was there in Berlin. We decided to it was a discussion where to set up the foundation. It's important, so we decided Berlin, and that's 3 years ago. After that, I've been working with these areas and the OCA that we will be explaining, and I'm doing business related tasks in both continents, Europe and Africa right now. Africa is very, very interesting, but I can't tell much about it because it's hopefully we'll be working with some governments.
Yeah, but the point being is you're working with governments in Africa as well as other humanitarian and nonprofit groups to implement what we're talking about today.
Exactly. That's our goal, is to implement what we are talking today about.
So that's perfect. So with that transition, let's jump in and talk about what we're talking about today. So, but before we do that, Paul, you want to talk to us a little bit about the Human Colossus Foundation and the foundation that's behind and supporting all of the content that we're talking about throughout today's discussion?
Sure. So as Petri alluded to, we initially had a group of us that had a meeting in Berlin where we kind of realized that some of the technologies that we were inventing were too big to be housed by a corporate entity. So we set up this foundation in Geneva so that we could work on some of these things by consensus as a group, so that we could kind of start deploying some open software for people to use. It was established in Geneva 2020. It's primarily focused on a dynamic data economy. The dynamic data economy is basically kind of what it says on the tin. It's trying to, we say that data is like electricity. It has value when it flows. It's costly when it stagnates. And so all of the technologies that we build there have that kind of frame of reference. So that we're trying to promote people to actively engage in data flows and stuff. Empowering individuals and businesses. There's a big kind of humanitarian side to what we do as well. So we're very aware of human rights and all of those kind of privacy components as well.
And again, if you want to learn more about the foundation, you go to humancolossus.foundation, and you're going to find tons of documents, resources, and things that we'll be referencing through the rest of today's talk.
I'm Michael.
Yeah,
that I would like to say that I'm really happy that in Berlin we made the decision that we won't patent the key parts of OCA, because I have patents. I know how it works and how it does not work. So this strategy that anybody can come to the foundation site and then download open source software and start using it without any legal problems is really important for.
Well, yeah, and I was talking to the team over at the Open Wallet Foundation, who's open sourcing the kind of standards layers of the open wallet, are the kind of the related elements of building out wallets and such. And they point out that by open sourcing software like this, it saves money, it saves time, it establishes, enables interoperability across systems, and it also improves security. So there's so many huge opportunities for this. And what we're talking about here, it goes alongside with like what the team over at the Open Wallet Foundation is doing. It's all kind of interrelated.
Yeah. And Mike, also, I should have also said that at the foundation, we have 3 councils. We have a knowledge council, an advisory council, and a technology council. And underneath those councils, there's working groups and task forces that are working within those specific domains, all going towards the same vision of the dynamic data economy.
Perfect. So let's talk about some of this and where we're at today and where we're at now. So today, your view and your vision is that we're in this node-centric design world of wallets, and you see us going into this future, what you're calling the self-actioning system or SaaS vision of mobile wallets. One that's really integrated across all of my different data repositories, different data systems. Can you talk about this transition just a little bit, not in too much detail, because we're going to get to the detail in just a minute.
Yeah, sure. So the current internet is really built off IP addresses. So it's that's what we mean by a kind of a node-centric model. And the model that we'll be introducing here is that if you put data at the core of the modeling, then the ramifications of that are very interesting. It basically means that it improves things like role-based access and all that sort of stuff. But we can delve into that more as we go into the webinar.
I just had an aha too from that regard. I was talking to one of the key players from the U.S. three-letter agencies who worked back with those groups in the 60s and 70s as they were trying to think through this idea of the internet. And he had made a point to me a few weeks ago that said there's kind of 2 theories of the way we manage data and the way the internet was built. And the first theory was set theory, where set theory is all about evaluating the relationship between nodes. Object A, object B, object A, object B is related together, and those nodes interact. And what he said was, at the same time, we were working through this concept called category theory, which actually doesn't necessarily evaluate at the nodes, but rather evaluates at the relationship between the nodes. And that interrogating the relationship between the nodes actually has so much more value, aka, and dare I say, semantic value, and that that's where we're evolving and going. And if you think about it, so for instance, in the context of today's webinar, today I'm the host, tomorrow I might be the speaker, the other point I might be an organizer. As an individual human being, I'm one node, but I have multiple roles that I play when I interact with things like this. And it's the management of those multiple nodes and how we go about doing that is what the concept of category theory is all about. So for those that super want to geek out, that's really what I think is happening here is we're moving from a set theory, node-centric design of the internet and the way we manage data in society into a category theory, data-centric design world, and the named relationships and links that we have between those types of those independent elements of data. You're nodding. You're agreeing with that?
Yeah, beautifully articulated, Michael. Yes, absolutely. Yep.
Fantastic.
And also since we are talking about now and the future, I think it's good to bring out what we are really focusing as a vision in the self-actioning system. Since I'm heading the group, also we're talking about search right now. Since we're talking about data, we're talking about search right now. But in the future, we're talking about discovery. And that's something that we will come back to later in the presentation.
And that's a really good point. That's a really good point too, because the old world model of the internet was let me go find that node. So I'm going to go search a keyword or key term and try to find a node. And what you're suggesting is in the future, we'll be able to leverage our AI systems and such to be able to actually have more advanced, more granular discovery of insights and data and relationships that we just simply can't do with the gross systems that we put in place today. So that's kind of, this is where we are today and where we're going. And as noted by so famously attributed to William Gibson, the future is already here. It's just unevenly distributed. So the things that are in this future state are here already. The self-actioning system, the OCA, the things we're going to be talking about in today's webinar are already here. They're just not necessarily happening in that scale. And we're going to talk about that. But let's take a step back and review some of the key terminology. So this idea of a digital wallet or a mobile wallet or a smart wallet or an advanced smart wallet or an open wallet or a decentralized wallet. I mean, there's so many terms that roll around this concept, but the idea is a wallet is an application that either is resident on my device or sitting in the cloud that has securely cryptographically stored my data in a way such that I'm the only one that can access the granular control and the use of that data. And that data may be used as a username and password, AKA credential, to give me authentication and authority into a system. It may be used for me to be able to assert my identity. I'm Michael Becker and I'm well over 21 years old. May also be able to be used for me to be able to assert other types of credentials too, like I've graduated from this university, or I'm a member of this group, or yes, I have the license to drive in California. There's so many utilities. And let's not forget, and oh, by the way, I am able to pay for some things, and here I'm giving you approval for me to be able to pay for things. So there's so many elements that come into this concept of a wallet. It's critically important. But as Paul had noted, we're moving from this node-centric economy to a data economy, that we're unlocking this data when we apply the things that we're talking about in today's webinar, that allows us to do a lot more with this data. And Paul, you want to talk about that, like harmonization or some of the key terms, semantics, context. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, well, let me start with the two semantics ones, because they're very geeky terms, so I can make it very easy there. Epistemological semantics and morphological semantics. At the moment, the way the world works is everybody's kind of working on ontologies, and ontologies are kind of where you build your knowledge representation graphs to link relationships between terms together. That's really epistemological semantics. But within that space currently, they're also defining objects in the ontology. And what we're doing is we're really splitting that out. So the epistemological semantics is about knowledge representation, and the morphological semantics is about data representation. And that's things like, you can think about things like, character encoding, format, basically the blueprint of a data set. That's morphological semantics. So it's data representation and knowledge representation.
And so for the layman in the room, like, so knowledge is like the insights and ideas that I can get out of this data. The morphological ideas are like, is this a URL? Is this a date? Is this a string? Is this a set? Is this a list? And then once I actually truly understand that at some harmonized scale, then I can do a ton of things with that. Links and associations and insights and management and security and all these other elements that I wouldn't necessarily be able to do otherwise at any semblance of scalable, cost-effective capability, correct?
Yeah, and the important thing to note is that when people talk about data harmonization across a distributed data ecosystem, the harmonization part is done in the morphological semantics, in the structure of data. It's not done in the ontologies. That's really important, that separation.
All right, perfect. Model, overlay architecture, SaaS. What are these things?
Yeah. So certainly the quad modal object we'll go into in a bit, but what it basically enables is, once you separate objects and events and concepts and actions into their separate space, you can when you drill that down to a multimodal object, a quad modal object, it allows you to have role-based access to different parts of that. So for instance, an auditor, for example, an auditor wants to certify signatures. So they only need really access to key event logs, whereas an auditor might want to order the actioning side of the model, which is more about algorithms and the triggers to enable data action. So that's like, an auditor can be assigned to that space. So it gives you this really granular role-based access within the quad modal object.
Well, and on that note, that really reflects back to what we've been talking about, for instance, starting last May with our MEF Connects ID and Auth event, where we were talking about the introduction of organizational identity versus personal data and identity. And organizational identity having this concept that we can imbue a cryptographic credential to an organization, that organization then can delegate credentials to their employees or their agents, if you will, whether or not it be a human being, a bot, a machine, an IoT device, an API, and then that agent representing that entity then can have delegated authority. And so that I hear some similarity in that role-based model too, is it's not just I am an auditor and I have this role, but I am an auditor and I've been cryptographically imbued this authority from this entity to which you now can verify. And that's partly what we're talking about with the wallet as well, is that when I show up, I show you that credential. You don't need to know anything other than me, but the fact that my authority and role are cryptographically verifiable.
Exactly, and that point is really key, is that when people talk about verifiable credentials, that's exactly what it is. It's a way of unlocking something. So like if you go onto an airplane, for example, your boarding pass is a form of credential. It allows you to get onto an airplane. It's the same in the cryptographic world, right? You have a credential to enable you to access something.
And the difference being, in the airplane, I've got a piece of paper and my passport. And now today I've got a mobile device assigned to my biometric that lets us have those assertions and claims of authority or claims to data. All right, tell us about OCA and SaaS, and let's jump into the details.
Overlays capture architecture. So at the moment in the current world, the way that the blueprint of a data set, if you like, all of the what we call the morphological semantics, are all burnt into one object. What OCA, overlays capture architecture, does is it takes each specific task within that blueprint and puts it as a separate object. So it's by default, when people talk about semantic interoperability, it's really OCA that enables that semantic interoperability. So it's much easier to, in the transformation stage, to transform from a format to another format, a label to another label, rather than to go from a convoluted structure to a totally different convoluted structure. OCA gives you that kind of harmonization between those two representations. So that's OCA.
And for those listening and you jump to the punchline, let me give you one example of that layering approach, and we'll be demonstrating this in a bit. Is one layer, for example, is the language that's used. And so I can easily swap, say, between English, French, and German, or Finnish, without affecting any other aspects of the mobile wallet experience or the system experience, which creates a number of benefits, both from a cost, from a time, from a development, from a security, et cetera. We'll be getting into that. Petri, tell us about SAS. What is that?
Yeah, so self-actioning system. That's sort of a gateway to the world of dynamic data economy, and that is built using these technologies that we have explained in this glossary, but also we will explain you during the discussions. And what it can achieve is obviously, because our view is that all data is available that you need, it will connect you to that data. We are data driven fully. So it will connect you to the data in a very, very user-friendly way. So it's a totally new user experience for the user or the consumer or the company.
Perfect. So let's talk about that. And before we get into this, what are the challenges that we're facing today? Paul, you want to share some of this with us?
Yeah, sure. So I've split it into 4 categories here: fragmented ecosystem, security and trust, user experience, and unlocking value. The key one that's really for today's talk is this fragmented ecosystem. Where the mobile wallet landscape's fragmented, so it's hindering seamless integration and interoperability. And obviously you have these various technical standards, which I mentioned about OCA, how we can kind of harmonize that piece in order to make cross-platform transactions. So if you're going things like across jurisdiction, those sorts of things, you need to have a harmonized framework to be able to do that. Security and trust, that's more really in the I guess the non-repudiation state or kind of the authentication sort of space. It's not my expertise, but probably in this audience, they know those problems very well. Things like identity theft, data provenance, all those sorts of things. That's in security and trust. The user experience. Petri, do you want to talk a little bit about the user experience now, what the problem is?
Yeah, I can talk about that. So right now, since we are in the wallet phase of the current future, we can see a problem in user experience. You need to do same tasks, but you do them in a different way. So in order to make good user experience, you're supposed to do it the same way. And what is the same way is to as little as possible. So now we have 2 problems. One is that you do the same task in a different way. You might not even understand that you're doing that task. And the second is that you're doing it in a different, you're not used to it. So the wallets are in a very early stage, and now we are looking where they are going, or we know that we have the vision, we know exactly where we are going, but the wallets are very fragmented from user experience point of view.
Got it. And then unlocking all about time savings, innovation, saving costs, reducing risk, better experience.
To me, Michael, that's kind of the crux as well of what we're talking about here is there's 80% of the world's data currently is unstructured data, and it's not really usable. So that's really what the unlocking value is. How can we take all of this data and make it usable so that we can get better insights and analytics for good business decisions and improve services?
Well, and again, I also want to be careful with that last statement you just said too. This is not just about making good business decisions from an organizational perspective. This is also about an individual who has sovereignty and agency over their data, being able to make good decisions, aka business decisions for themselves. Like, do I want to share that data? Or do I want to revoke that data? Do I trust that person I'm interacting with? So it's really that merging of the organizational and personal centric approaches that we're seeing in the marketplace today. And you mentioned 80%. It's actually 90% of data is unstructured out there. And what that means is we don't really know what to do with that data. And that's what this harmonization strategy is that we're talking about here. Moreover, and this IDC study where these numbers come from has some other really interesting nuances that come out of it. For example, they say roughly 5%-ish, if not more, of this data is is absolutely hypercritical in real time. So, for example, if I'm a diabetic and my monitor is measuring my insulin, which is communicating with my smart wallet, which is in turn talking to my doctor on my behalf, that's like life and death kind of stuff we're talking about. The other thing that this report refers to is the fact that the vast majority of this data, and I believe the number is somewhere between 80 and 90%, is actually being generated by mobile devices. And when we say mobile, we're not just talking about phones, we're talking about IoT devices and the other billions of devices that are enabling this connectivity out there in the world, which, by the way, is then leading to the fact that we as self-sovereign individuals and agents, and not just us as humans, but also our devices and the things that represent us, will be interacting with an IoT device every 13 to 18 seconds of every day. So the necessity of us to be able to be in control of our, not just our identity, the assertion of who we are, but actually the sharing of the attributes related to that identity. What's my age? What, am I over 21 or over 35? Do I have the credential and license to move from hospital A to hospital B? And on that one note alone, for example, the NHS did a study last year just on the simple credentialing for doctors to be able to say, I am a doctor, I work for the NHS system, so therefore I should be able to move from hospital B to hospital A without any friction. The simple removing of the paperwork of that by using credentialing systems like what we're talking about today reduced over 20 million pounds of cost, out of the system. The Finnish government. Also, I'm sorry, let me finish the statement. The Finnish government, as Ubisecure reported in May, by implementing this type of system that we're talking about today, not exactly OCA, but the conceptual model, reduced 90% of the cost of corporate tax filings in Finland by using a system like this. So, there are legitimate reasons for what we're doing. Yeah, Petri?
Yeah, I just want to point out that this is the number here, that's 175 zettabytes of data, and right now in EU, for instance, Finland too, the idea is that you create a credential for a bit of information, like a passport. That's a bit of information, but we're talking about 175 zettabyte of data. It's not possible. That direction doesn't work. So what you do, you harmonize the data, you create a solution where you can find the data, and after that, once you have those, then you can use credentials for a bundle of data. That's how you can do it, actually.
I think that's a really important point you're bringing up. So when we're talking about smart wallets today, and we're talking about credentials today, most of us are thinking about my passport, my driver's license, and that little bits of information that's coming out of those devices, and we'll call that the smart wallet. If you remember in the introduction, I was talking about other names of wallets, like the advanced wallet. The advanced wallet is, for instance, a wallet that connects to a personal data store or a broader personal information management system, where, to Petri's point, that sea of all of my data, not just my passport data, my driver's license data, but all of my behavior, all of my purchases, all of my financial history, all of my health records, and then the ability to create discovery across all of those disparate systems in a decentralized way, safely and securely in real time, is what we're talking about today.
Which also what we call the microdata. And
Correct.
Previously, in the future, at the moment, it's called, for legal reasons, it's called metadata, or part of it would be cookies. But
Correct.
That's all data. That is important to understand. There is no differentiation between metadata and data.
Yeah,
so you need to also
metadata
have
is
access
data
to
too.
that.
You're absolutely right. And metadata is just the labeling of data, right? And
Yep.
it's all part of that process. So tell us about a little bit more of the data challenges now.
Sure. So yeah, these are just the broad things that we'll be talking about. Data representation. So before I talked about that separation between data representation and knowledge representation, you can think of data representation as some of the morphological semantics for a data set. But some of the challenges in that space are really, the amount of data that we've been talking about here, and how it's in diverse structures and data types. How can we harmonize those different structures? The data provenance is really more about the tractual evidence of an event happening over a track, if you like, so that you always know anytime anything has happened in the system, it's all logged. There's proof
let's
of that.
Pause right there. In the world of fake news, to which we're addressed right now, and deep fakes and all of that, the data provenance issue is absolutely critical. Like when I show up in a phygital environment, trying to digitally present an assertion about me in a physical realm, for example, how do you actually know I am who I am, right? Data provenance is all about my assertion of I'm Michael Becker, and my digital assertion that I actually have graduated from this college, for instance, and the ability for you, the relying party, the receiver of that assertion, to be able to, in near real time, validate the provenance. Yes, this school on that date issued you that that diploma. That's provenance.
Yep.
Another idea of provenance is my bank account is X, my credit score is Y, when I'm asserting myself to be able to get a loan. So provenance is absolutely critical, and it's going to affect every aspect of our society.
Right now, in this situation that we are, most data is not even real. It's duplicated, and it doesn't have real
there's no provenance.
Anything to do with there's no provenance. So if you are a business decision maker, you can think that you're investing in any kind of data analytics, anything, and you're investing in nothing because you don't know where that data comes from, or is it in any way true. So you're losing so much money.
And one last thing, we
now.
want to get to the next few slides, but a key point on that too is this whole idea of consent, right? Do you have the provenance of that consent? Can you prove that I said, yes, you're allowed to interact with me? And under GDPR, CCPA, and the other regulatory models that are coming out, that's part of provenance. So it's a critical thing to talk about.
Yeah, I'll just do the last two very quickly. Knowledge representation, you can think of ontologies and vocabularies and all those sorts of things. At the moment, that's a very, very fragmented space. So you can build on different core ontologies to kind of build out these concepts. And, there's obviously a challenge for kind of getting it so that those ontologies can start to understand each other. And then the last one is algorithmic processing, which is kind of obviously a hot topic at the moment with all these kind of AI models and stuff, is the algorithms behind those things. Are they properly audited to be able to use those into a distributed system?
And again, are they properly secured? Do I know who's connecting to that algorithm? Do I know who's connecting to that API to be able to exchange the data? So, and an important point. So to kind of summarize what we're talking about today, and going back to one of the core wallet challenges you talked about, is the standards and the data formats and the cross-barrier transactions between data repository A through Z, because in a distributed market, it's not just one centralized repository. You've got the wallet connecting to multiple repositories, and say one wallet with multiple repositories trying to connect to another wallet internally or externally within itself from B to Z repositories. So this multi-dimensional distributed environment. And today what's happening is there's tons of manual work, working in customization and coding going on to make that happen. And to make that happen consistently and securely. And the solution to that is really what we're talking about today. The solution is implementing frameworks like the OCA to be able to automate the secure enablement of that. So you implement the OCA framework once, and then all that manual harmonization, all that manual alignment goes away. Is really the promise to which the dialogue we have today as we're talking about. So
when you structure the data when it's born in an OCA format, when it becomes data, you don't need to use any money for that. So once you start using it just from the beginning, it's $0 for you to use that data or any data in the world after that.
Yeah. So your point
this
being
is huge.
When you birth the data into an appropriate harmonizable format naturally within a recognized industry standard framework, you just have massive, right out of the gate, you have interoperability and harmonization and cost savings and money savings and security and all those other things. So let's talk about the data design models, Paul.
Yes, so I'll quickly whiz through these and we can go into more detail in the next slide. So the informatics domain model is basically taking, it's a different vantage point of the system, if you like. It's putting data at the core rather than the node at the core. And the informatics model is something that took about 3 years to develop.
Let me pause you right there. Let me pause you right there, just in my simple brain here. So data at the core versus node at the core. Difference being my name, my address, my passport number, my date of birth versus the passport at the core. So rather than saying passport, I'm saying my data. And then the data then becomes a passport. Correct?
Exactly, yeah. And I think, we will learn more as I go through the informatics model. Quad modal object is interesting. So in the informatics model, we separate it into 4 domains, which I'll show you. The quad modal object is basically the center of all of that thing. This one object where you can have role-based access into a evolutive data flow. That's the quad modal object.
And again, we have role-based access in today's IAM systems. The difference here is cryptographically verifiable role-based access done at scale in a decentralized model.
Yeah, and actually having access into a live data flow rather than having access into a particular lockdown siloed space.
Into a system or into nodes, right? So the difference between I have access at individual data attributes versus access to a broad system, which then could give me access to things I really shouldn't have access to.
Exactly. You nailed it. And then overlays capture architecture. I think this is really key, Michael, is this architecture. This is kind of at the core of everything, where you need to harmonize between different structures of data so that it's in an understandable format for anybody to then use for their own data actions and stuff. As you mentioned before, Michael, in the world we're going to, that would be in your own personal space, which we call the self-actioning system.
otherwise known as a PIMS, otherwise known as a personal data store, otherwise, but the
all the
PIMS
same
data store is all those numbers. The actioning system is the wrapper around it that lets me interact with it. And then that's where Petri's expertise comes into play. So what are we looking at here?
Okay, so yes, so so where to start with this? Okay, so I'm going to actually just read off some real quick definitions because it nails the entire model. So objects. So objects represent the structural aspects of data and its attributes. They define the morphological structure of schematic variables, data structures, functions, and methods. That's the object space. Events capture the occurrence of specific incidents or actions within the computational system. They provide traction.
Can you give us examples? So an object is like what? A person, and an event is like a person at dinner.
Yeah, so no, person, yes, but a person can get a bit dangerous there. I would say an object can, so an object can be literally anything. A credential is a digital object, or a complex form is a digital object. It's basically anything in the physical world that is a passive object.
A passport's an object. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. So with the events, it's really, this is what we're talking about, the data provenance. So this is providing tractual evidence supporting the topological causality of interrelated events and causal actions. So it's all about key event logs is up in that space.
So one example of that is the birth of the passport. Like, when was that passport issued? It could be an event. Or when was that passport used?
Yeah, and what happens to it over time, right? So like if in India you have an Indian visa that needs to be put into the passport, that event gets logged into the event log as well.
So now we have two objects. We have a passport object and a visa object, and those two events now start associating with it. Got it. Okay, actions.
Yep. So I'll start. I'll go to concepts first. So concepts encompass the contextual terms, relationships, and knowledge associated with the data. So, Michael, you could think of it as the context. I think you were calling it that. So it's like contributing to the knowledge of a concept or an idea. So this is really all about user stories. The way I always think about it is a concept, it could be, when you have detectives that kind of put drawing pins in a board and put strings to each thing, these kind of graph representations in the real world, that's building a concept. So you say, in that case, you say, you've been framed. The reason it says frame at the bottom of concepts is that's a core piece of it. And then the last
goes back to the category theory we were talking about earlier, but yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
And then action.
And then the actions. So the actions represent the computational intelligence and functionalities that operate on the data. So it provides blocks of valued information for a systemic actioning system to leverage for data lifecycle operations and computational intelligence. So it's basically anything that it's the trigger. So it's any algorithmic trigger, that sort of stuff. Does that make sense to you, Michael?
It does. And let's go now back to the actioning elements of this. Now it doesn't hurt to reiterate it. Semantics is a tough term to wrap your head around. So let's redefine that before we discuss these relationships again.
Yep. So semantics is really about the meaning of data. That's all it means is semantics, the meaning of data. So in the top right there, you see that the objects and the concepts, they need to be agreed by consensus in a multi-stakeholder environment. So it's all the standards and all that sort of stuff. The reason that you have working groups and stuff to noodle that stuff together is it needs to have a consensus opinion on what the meaning of data is. So that's really the semantic part.
And again, going back to epistemological, I can't pronounce it, is knowledge. and
yes.
This is structure. So what the conceptual knowledge of what we know about data, and then and how the data actually is structured and organized and harmonized and such. That's what these two concepts, and you want those to be
exactly. So those two things.
you can also explain semantics in a very easy way. You can have data, but without semantics, the computer can't understand the data. So you need a semantic layer, in our case, layers, for the computer to understand the data. So basically, the data doesn't exist in the computer world without semantics.
Well, yeah. So, for example, if I saw a string that said Thursday, July 20th, 2023, the computer would have absolutely no idea what that string meant unless I gave it a morphological label of I'm a date. Yeah. And then I said, and therefore, that date actually resolves to a number keyed off of like July 1st, I think 1973 or something like that. But that's the idea there. But let's talk about mechanics.
And the mechanics is what people will call digital identity, Michael. It's really the so in that community they talk a lot about the authentication space and the wallet space, right? So it's really, you can think of the semantics and the mechanics. The semantics is really a consensual scheme within and then the mechanics is about sovereign reason. It gives you the autonomy as a human being to interact in the system. So that's kind of the computational mechanics and the topological mechanics.
And so in other words, as a human being, as an individual, Michael Becker out there in the wild, I have the authority to assert claims about myself. If Michael Becker's working for a company, I don't necessarily have sovereign authority, and this is Timothy Ruff from Prominent talks about this a lot. When you're in the organizational environment, you are a sovereign human, but you don't have sovereign authority because you're representing an entity who's given you authority, and you can only have the authority to which the entity has given you. Which means I can't go write a check for $1 million, but I might be able to write one for 5,000, right? Or not one at all. And that's where these kind of nuances come into play.
Yep.
Okay. So let's move. And again, I want to make sure we have time to get to the demos. So let's talk about the Quaddle model again. So how is this related?
Yeah, so this is kind of in the previous slide where you have the data diamond in the middle. This is just drilling into that diamond. And because we kind of separated the domains there, it's interesting what happens.
And just so we're clear, that you're talking about this part right here.
Correct. Yeah, exactly.
So growing into that. Okay.
Yeah. So what's interesting in this space is that once you have those different events, objects and stuff, you can have different roles that have access in a quad modal object just to one of those quadrants. So for example, like a notary is appointed to certify key signatures of auditable events. That's what they're supposed to do. And so all they need in that quad modal object is access to the record fingerprint. So you can give them credential access to just a part of the data flow that they need. They don't have to have access to any of the other pieces.
So in that point, again, passport's probably a bad example on that, but I don't have to give them access to my entire passport in that strategy right now. I'm just giving them passport to access to a part of it.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay.
And
it's all about credential access, this model. So it's the same thing as an auditor, as I mentioned. So like an auditor, they need to basically conduct a systematic review or assessment of guardable actions. So it's really important in the space that we're going into, where we have all this. The reason that the AI guys are worrying a little bit is because there's not much governance behind AI at the moment. That will come naturally. But really the auditor ID here, he can just have access to get to check these algorithmic processes to make sure that they're suitable for deployment within a distributed data ecosystem.
Fantastic. All right, and let's go to this then. What are we looking then when we move into the OCA layer and how that works?
Yep. So if you think at the moment, I was mentioning that you've got different data structures for different entities in completely convoluted structures and formats, right? There's nothing unified about the different things they're using. So really, OCA is a way of having a common architecture that everybody can understand. So even within a convoluted structure, you still have the same things that you have in there, but they're usually burnt into a single object. So things like character encoding, formatting, labeling, all of these things, they're still there, but we don't know what structure they're being captured in. And so what OCA does, it basically says, if you want to transform between this format and this format, it's much easier to do between format overlays, because you understand that it's a format. Same thing if you're changing from English labels to Chinese labels, for instance. It's the same thing. It's easier to do the transformation or the translation between those objects. And without that kind of semantic interoperability of this piece, you'll never get proper data harmonization in order to be able to automate some of the machine processing to really understand data and between systems.
Well, and as you were saying, in kind of the preamble to this as well, is by separating out these layers, I'm also separating out security challenges too, because if there's one giant honeypot where all these transformations are happening, if that honeypot gets hacked, that hacker, that criminal gets access to everything. Whereas when you're having a layered approach like that, if just the labeling layer gets hacked, then they can tweak and label on a thing, but they're not actually getting access to the root data.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that I should have mentioned, which is really important, is that each of these separate objects can have a different custodian of those different objects. So it doesn't mean that one entity has to control this entire thing. You could have like the Finnish government that is looking after the translations for this one particular structure, and they have the kind of the authority to be able to be the full custodian of that object. So it gives you this beautiful granularity.
So in some respects too, and again, this is could be a bad analogy, but it pops into my head. So you know how, for instance, Google hosts like Google Fonts, and they're in control of that, and I can pull Google Fonts if I want into my website and use them at any time I want, and I'm not actually locally storing them, I'm not locally managing them, I'm letting Google handle all of that, and I'm just pulling it in that example, and there sounds similar mechanics.
Exactly. And all I'm showing on this slide here is that you can get this kind of bundled structure, and you can really render it into a kind of a complex object. In this case, it's a form, but it could be anything. It could be a credential.
And we're going to show a live example of that in just a minute. So let's talk about then. So what is this solving? All of this?
Yeah. So Petri, do you want to have a go at this one?
Well, at least the discovery part is very, very important. So for example, think about a situation where you have multiple languages and you don't have OCA. So what will happen? You have to you don't discover actually, because you don't know it's the same data. But with OCA, in every country, everywhere in the world, you know it's the same data. It doesn't matter what the language.
This data is an address, for example.
Yes.
Without that label, I don't know it's an address.
Yes. In the olden days, without OCA layering, you don't know anything because it's in Chinese, it's in Finnish, and so on and so on. You are in trouble. But with our solution, with the discovery, that's the starting point of like huge change that then ends up with the SAS.
Okay.
You can continue.
Yeah, no problem. So the access is really about the credentials. So it's the credentials give you the authority to access different spaces, whether that's a data space or an airplane, whatever it is, right? That's what the verifiable credentials do. So in the model here, we're very aware how important credentials are, and they're kind of integrated into our designs. So that's more about access.
And so let's do a couple demos because let's try to bring some of this to life. So we already talked about the OCA. So now I've got here, let me go here. I'm going to refresh this page. And so I'm coming to a demo, and we're at British Columbia. Is that right? The government?
Yeah, the government of British Columbia are using OCA for multi-language branded credentials using that kind of layered structure.
I go ahead and randomly grab one of those. So a British Columbia lawyer showcases their personal credential. And so what I'm seeing here, so I've got a mobile wallet, basically my phone for the simple example, and I'm presenting it. And when someone clicks on that, that then presents up the data schema that's coming up out of the OCA layering that you've shown us. And in that schema, it's got name, given address, and all of that. And then what you're saying here is I could easily, change the language layer, and now I've instantly turned that experience into French.
Yep, exactly, and it's all done through this. So all it's doing in the background is it's basically pulling in the French language overlays into the OCA bundle, and then when you render it, it's in that language.
So if we're going back to here, it's basically that labeling layer in this demo is what we're tweaking when we do that.
Yeah, and actually it's the same thing on the entries. So actually, the entries themselves on the kind of the scroll down list, that's the same. You can translate all of the predefined entries into a different language as well. So it does.
So you mean like in layman's terms, the drop downs?
Yes, exactly.
Right. Got it.
Yep.
Got it.
Yep.
So this is an example of putting OCA to work. And so if you've built your mobile wallet, or frankly, web application, if you will, it doesn't matter. But if you built your mobile wallet with this framework, it's giving you that more granular control, but also the access controls and who's allowed to control that layer and not.
Exactly.
And you have a lot of branding opportunity here with this example is already there, showing that you can change so many things in such a, like, you don't need almost any work to do it. It's so easy, so fast.
That's the other point too. It's not just changing the labels; it's also changing the brands and the colors and all aspects of it. Not to mention the data flows and how that works. In our last couple of minutes, the other demo we had here. Let me refresh the screen. So let's say I had a Swiss passport. Come on. All right. And I'm going to upload the zip file. What am I uploading here? The data schema of a Swiss passport?
Yeah. So what you're uploading is basically an OCA bundle, which it contains the capture base and all of the overlays. And what you're looking at here is just, say you've got like iCal. iCal could be in control of the capture base of this form, where you could have different entities that are controlling some of the labels, all that kind of stuff. That's fine. But if you click on the credential part here, on the right there, yeah, exactly. This renders into a Swiss passport, for example. But what's interesting is it's still the same OCA bundle. It's just that the base component is the capture base, but within that you can add, branding layers and credentials and stuff.
And as we said earlier, change the languages. So in other words,
exactly.
So in other words, if I'm traveling and I've got an OCA enabled passport, if I meet someone who doesn't speak English, they could translate my passport into Spanish and be able to read it and understand it.
Exactly. Yeah, it's huge,
with
right?
it still being legal, with it still being verifiable, with the provenance still all being there, still a perfectly legal passport. Just the person now receiving it in context can read it in their context, not mine.
Exactly. It's all about governance, right? So long as the governance is rock solid behind all of those renderings, then yeah, you're good to go.
Fantastic. And then one other live project you have underway is with the agri-food data in Canada. And again, we know this one, but you can explain what's happening. Yeah,
sure. So this is really for the research community to find data sets and schemas for use in different projects. But actually, the semantic engine is a very important component, because what we're really building is this kind of piloting. It's a piloting array, which we think will be at the heart of the self-actioning system. So it's a long process, but these are some of the things that we're developing.
All right, so we've got about 4 minutes left. We do have one question from Maven, which I'll get to in just a minute. But just to kind of wrap up before we get to Maven's question is, so again, what we've been talking about is this transition from a nodal-centric design model to this data-centric design model, and passport to my name, address, and all of the elements, and then you'll be able to repurpose that data in real time within context, within systems, and that's what generates the self-actioning system. You want to summarize the benefits of what all this will give to us?
I can like have an example of the future, which in some way at least summarizes the self-actioning system vision. Is like we have ChatGPT and large language models right now as a big trend, but we don't know where that data comes from. We don't know who it comes from. We don't know anything that can it even be used. But with our solution, when we have SAS, you know everything. You know who's it from. You can connect it with that person, that company. You can have all that background information for your solution. So it basically, that's a summary of the benefits here.
Okay. And let me be really clear. When you say our solution, you're meaning the open source community that anyone can leverage and build on top of commercially.
Yes.
Right.
Correct.
And because you guys have your own commercial development stuff building on your own stuff. This is like Red Hat versus Linux. So anybody that commercially wants to use this, you can go download the open source stuff and figure it out yourself, or come and hire Petri and Paul in their commercial side of their existence to help you implement all of this.
Yes.
But sorry, that's my unabashed sales pitch for the two of you. But go ahead. Petri, you want to summarize the benefits for us?
Paul, you can summarize.
Yeah, sure. Just very quickly, it's really a money-saving exercise, all of this. So at the moment, when you go through that kind of curation process, it's hugely resource heavy. By doing kind of some of these implementations, it just kind of nails that stuff right at the start of the journey, so that all of that heavy curation process is basically negated. And it's a big cost saving for organizations and for you as an individual, right? You don't have to waste your time trying to figure things out. A lot of this is harmonized within your own environment.
Okay,
and so then basically when you're
role-based access, I think is critical. We talked about, and then discovery, which is Petri's. Discovery, you want to?
Yeah. Once you when the data is born, when you use OCA, you don't have to use any time, money, or resources anymore for usage of the data. That's huge. When we think that it's 156 zettabytes of data, that is not almost none of it is structured. So that's already a huge change.
And let me go ahead.
Yeah, and then what you can do with it is, of course, the discovery. So you can discover anything you need from your own data, from company data, or anywhere from the world. What you need: people, data, solutions, companies. You can, if you need shoes, they come to you because everything is harmonized.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Now, and the other thing that comes to mind when I talk about it, and think about this too, now that I consider it more, is this idea that's going to fundamentally change business models out there as well. In that, right now, for example, one of the groups I work with is Leading Points in Military Connect, and what they're doing is they're building a multi-place, multi-reusable marketplace, so that a veteran only needs to assert that they're and verify that they're a veteran once. And then from then on forever, that credentialing that they are in fact a veteran doesn't need to be redone, so they can interact with any of the properties and any of the partners within the Military Connect environment without having to re-verify that they're a veteran. And what that does is, one, it saves a ton of time, but two, it saves a ton of cost. So like right now, to do a dip into a network, into an ID system today to verify, is this person a veteran? That could cost $1, $2, $3, right? Now, every time they do it. Whereas now, when you implement systems like this, it only costs $1 or $2, $3 once. And now they get to forever continue to use that that credential without that underlying re-verification cost, which then fundamentally shifts and changes nearly every business model. So those are the other things. Those are the other things I need to think about. So we're a little bit over our time, but for you, Petri, Marvin had a question. I'm really loving the presentation. A quick question in regards to the African context. Is the continent ready for this digital wallet from the perspective of understanding consumers from one data point?
That's a great question. Thank you. The person who asked the question knows, I just came from Kenya, and Kenya is one of the leading wallet countries in the world. They have very sophisticated wallet infrastructure already there. So I think it's more than ready.
Well, and you also met with Priyanka over at Red Cross and talked to her about their cross-border humanitarian efforts with the digital wallet. Who by the way, spoke at our May event. So if you want to watch that, if anybody watching this, go to the MEF Connects ID and Auth event, and you can see Priyanka's talk about how the Kenyan Red Cross is using digital wallets.
She was very insightful of what we can work together. That was an amazing meeting with her. Okay. Yes.
So Paul and Petri, you want to wrap us up? We're a little bit over, so let's.
Yeah, sure. I mean, for the conclusion, I think that hopefully everyone's got the main benefit of what we've talked about. But just rather than go through these points here, the main ones are really semantic interoperability and data harmonization, data provenance, understanding the kind of the concepts that are out in the wild, and then having the sovereign reason and capability of being to act on all of that kind of integrated solutions and the data. So that's kind of a broad nutshell, if you like, of what we've talked about.
So we can, what I would like to say is that we can save time and money when you are a company, and within the company when you have data. We can solve those problems. Then we can solve problems between companies, but also we can solve problems between industries as well. And then in the biggest picture, we can solve problems, data-driven problems, which is almost all problems, between citizens, between all humans in our globe.
And then ergo the name, Human Colossus Foundation. So with that in mind, what are the four key call to actions, the frothy excitement that people have now with this? What do they do now that they've listened to all of this?
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Michael. Appreciate it. So we've got a few working groups at the foundation, one for decentralized semantics, one for the self-actioning system, and we're setting up a new one for the distributed governance. So there's a link there that people can click on, and that will kind of guide you through the process of joining a working group. You can sign up to our newsletter. That kind of gives you all the kind of upcoming stuff that we're working on. It's we don't pester people with that newsletter. It doesn't come out very often, but when it does, it's rich, full of really good content. We're always looking for financial support. So if you like what we're doing, there's ways of donating to the foundation. It's a non-profit foundation, so you can have all your kind of tax incentives for doing that. And that's kind of
supports. And on that point too, you're not just looking for just obviously, checks coming your way are great, but also suggestions like grants, collaborative projects. You're open to being creative about that, correct?
Exactly. Yeah. So that was the last point, is that you can suggest a collaborative project that you think you really like to work on. And then with the foundation and with your resources on your side, we can kind of look for funding for that particular collaborative project and work in a kind of a consensual environment underneath the foundation to try and noodle that together. And we're an interesting foundation anyway. We really build stuff. We don't just talk about stuff. We put it in action, and then we get our developers to go and build it. So
and as we've seen from the live cases that are actually out there into the wild. So there are a number of
if you propose a project, we can see what components are generic that, for instance, SAS would use as a generic component. If we have them already, then that's great. You will find that out right then. If we don't have, we can collaborate through the foundation to create it. And then those that are specific to your need and so on, they are your IPR. So then that would be then a separate area.
Yeah, fantastic. You've got to have several resources, and there you go, gentlemen. This was a blast. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed it. And let's call it a wrap. If people want to get in touch with you, where do they go? Sorry, we didn't put contact information here. So how do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, for me, it's just paul.knowles at humancolossus.org. But if you can't remember that, then the easiest way is to go to the website and hit the contact there and go through that way, and we'll get in touch with you.
And they can also reach out to both of you on LinkedIn as well, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah, LinkedIn is good.
Yeah. Perfect.
LinkedIn is very good.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And we'll hopefully have you back soon.
Thanks, Michael. That was good fun.
Awesome. Take care, everybody.
Take care.
See you later. Bye.